the spiral.
Are
you able to move the slides forward?
I've moved the slides forward. I'm not sure why it's not moving forwards. Can you see it now? Can you see the slides now?
Something's changing. We can see the spiral and I can see your mouse moving.
I'm actually clicking through. So if we pause just for a moment, we'll see if we can get it to work. Can you see anything now?
Still seeing your screen, Steph. I don't know if you can move to the bottom left-hand corner of your slides and you might see the arrows to change the presentation in Zoom.
Okay, I'm going to try that and see if that works better. Apologies if you can't see that. Can you see now?
No, maybe if you stop sharing your screen, Steph, and then reshare, and that might help us. I'm sure many of the teachers attending will be very familiar with these kinds of problems.
Yeah, it's a classic,
a few in the chat saying that this is what happens to me.
I'm so sorry, everybody. We've practiced this and it all went beautifully. So inevitably, it's not going so well now. Hold on. And I will try sharing screen again. Is anything happening now?
Great. So we can see you in PowerPoint now, Steph.
Okay.
If you start the presentation again, then hopefully you'll be able to click through and we'll get to the right slide.
Can everyone see now?
Yeah, we can see you clicking through.
Ah, brilliant. Okay, yeah. Can everyone see?
Yep, so we've got by the end of the session now, what is autonomy in learning?
Fantastic. So sorry, everybody, and thank you very much for stepping in, Matt. Let's go back and just recap quickly.
Thanks,
so
Beth.
What is autonomy in learning? Just to recap, here are the key points that we think that Little rather says are the characteristics of autonomous learning. So there you go. That's the complex or more difficult definition. And here is the simple definition from the Cambridge Dictionary online. So, as I was saying, I think if we take our definition as a simple one, making choices and thinking about learning, then these are much more manageable both for teachers and for young learners. And just to define those a little bit, by making choices, first of all, we need to make sure that our learners understand the purpose of the activities, that they know where they're going. It's like a little bit of a road trip. They need to know the end point to decide how quickly they're getting there. We also want our learners to be motivated to achieve that end point, to achieve those goals. And we want them to use different strategies to achieve those goals. And in terms of thinking about learning, we want our learners to begin to self-reflect. Obviously, they may not do it when young to the same extent as adults, but we can start them on that journey. So why is autonomy important? Okay, well, here are some different reasons that autonomy is important for learning. And you can see me, hopefully see me clicking through. And there you go. We've got lots of different colours here. So I'd like you to think about which one is the most important for you. And if you can, maybe type either the number or the colour into the chat box. So just take a moment. Which ones are the most important for you? Please share your ideas in the chat box. I'll give you a moment to do that. Oh, sorry, I'm going back. Okay, we've got different colours coming through. Some people are saying purple. Some people are saying blue. Okay, it doesn't really matter which ones you've chosen because they are all quite important concepts. They're all essential to learning or to successful learning. And just to flag, I also use that kind of activity with learners too. For example, if I'm working with young learners and I am doing vocabulary on hobbies, I might give them some hobbies, maybe in words like this, or even in pictures, and the students can select which one is their favourite. So they can type the word into a chat box, or they can, if they have a mini whiteboard, they can hold up their whiteboard and show which they have chosen. So all of these are important. Autonomy makes learners much more successful, and it makes them more motivated towards goal orientation. And it also is important for their life skills. They can use autonomy developed in their language lessons to other areas of their life and learning, and not just when they are younger, but also for the rest of their lives. I'm sure that you are all aware, very strongly aware, that at the moment our current situation means the need for autonomy is especially important. Students have suddenly been thrown into an environment where they're having to work from home. But I think we should see it as an opportunity to develop skills, both us and our learners, for future use. So it's not easy. There are lots of challenges. Typically, the challenges that people face when working with young learners include the fact that they say, my learners are still too young. They can't make decisions. They're too little, too young to do that. There's also sometimes feedback that learners are quite passive. They expect the teacher to. That's why the teacher is there. Or they say, well, autonomy, you need to be very skilled to do that, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, all of those types of things. And teachers don't have time to deal with all of these aspects of teaching and learning. Also, for teachers, it's quite difficult. How do you develop autonomy in your learners? We know about language teaching, but what about autonomy? So these are some of the difficulties that we might face. And I think the key thing to remember is that developing autonomy in your learners is a long process. If we're teaching a grammar point, let's go to familiar ground. When you teach grammar, you don't teach a small point and then expect your learners to be able to use it fluently and immediately in class. And likewise with autonomy, it takes a long time to begin to develop that characteristic in learners. And so we have to be persistent, and we have to do it in small steps. It's not one step, it's many steps. And for those of you who think, my learners are a bit young, or it takes me start to build steps, then they'll never develop that skill. So our role is really to be persistent and to support our teachers in moving forward. Okay, so we've already decided that we're going to bring down the concept of autonomy to a couple of simple key points: making choices and thinking about learning. You'll have noticed that I've already given you some activities, even though the PowerPoints didn't quite work. We already did involving choice. So at the beginning, I asked you to choose how I would show you the outcome of the session, either the coloured squares or the spiral. When we were looking at why autonomy is important, I asked you to choose from a list and talked about how students could choose and vote using words or colours. So you can see that I've already included the concept of making choices and sharing choice with your learners. But I'd like to now go on to look at some other ways that we can achieve these things. Excuse me. So if we are talking about making choices, we need to make sure that we show learners the purpose of our activity, understand the purpose of what they are doing. We're sharing our outcomes with them, that we offer choice to the learners to really involve them with the learning. That really motivates students to get involved and to achieve, and that we scaffold in strategies to support them with this. In terms of thinking about learning, we need to begin to encourage them to think about how well they've done or what they need to continue to work on. So we need to provide a positive environment for self-reflection. So in this next part of the webinar, I'd like some, and that you could either online, or hopefully one day we'll all be back in our classrooms face to face, and you would be able to adapt them for face to face learning. These examples can also be adapted to use with adults. So I've worked with adults and with young adults and with young learners, including very young learners. And very often I find that activities that work with one group can be adapted and used for a different context. So whatever your teaching background or context, I hope you'll find some of the ideas useful. As I've mentioned before, I'm not particularly tech savvy. So if you find technology quite scary, please don't worry. You will do it. A good teacher is a good teacher. It just depends on the tools that you're using to deliver your teaching. So without further ado, let's look at some other activities. As I've mentioned, if we want to involve our students, it's really important to establish outcomes. Excuse me. So the first thing to do, especially with young learners, is to grab attention. This is particularly important if you are working. It's much easier in a classroom to see what people are doing, but when you're not in a classroom, you really need to make sure that you can bring everybody in and focused. So some ways of grabbing attention: total physical response is obviously good. If you have video share like we have here and the class is small enough, you can ask the students to make sure they're showing them, and you get them to wave. So say each of their names, they wave at the camera. And you can also use things like jumping. So you can do your tests. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Jump if you can hear me, jump if you can see me, and so on. Those work very well with young learners. I wouldn't necessarily do that with adults. Maybe the waving. Excuse me. You can also use the chat box and ask your students to put in emoticons or words. So, can you hear me? Can you see me? And the students can type in their thumbs up or type in yes, and so on. Obviously, if you're face to face, you can also get your students to give you a thumbs up. Another technique that works if you've got synchronous sound, if you're online, but also I use this face to face, you can use chants. So you can get them to learn little chants like 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. And as you start to say it, they have to join in, and it really pulls back their attention. And you can think of your own chants as well, or even ask the students to make up their chants. So we have things like ready, steady, go, yes or no. And they can say ready, steady, go, yes, yes, yes. Have a think about what you could do with that. Young learners love chanting, and it's a good way to bring back their attention, whether you are online or face to face. Again, I probably wouldn't use chants with adults. Use these types of techniques regularly, particularly if you are online between transitions from one task to another. Why not get them to do a little chant or to say, okay, we're moving on to the next task, get them to wave again. And that way you can be sure that your students, even if they are online, are paying attention. Right, so let's now think about establishing outcomes. So you can use guessing games. Traditionally, I think what teachers do, there was a big phase where everyone was told you must share outcomes. And so when I was working with teacher development and professional development, I saw lots of teachers writing outcomes on the board. In this lesson, we're going to do this and this, pop them on the board, and that have a look. But that's not really involving your students. Might be okay sometimes, but why not use guessing games? So we used, for example, the coloured squares, and we used the word spiral. As I've said before, the coloured squares, if you're face to face, you could do it with post-it notes hidden and get the students to come up and pull off the post-it notes. If you're online, you can use the PowerPoint, just find out how to do a little reveal slide, and you can get, if you've got a very small class, to share controls of the screen and let them select what they open them, or like the word spiral, and then you can confirm and talk to them about the outcomes. But by doing the guessing game, you really engage their interest and you're adding that choice. Other ideas, you could, if you prefer, use some picture clues. Now I'm going to use examples from Power. As Matt mentioned, I was involved in writing it, but you can use any materials. These are all adaptable depending on what you are teaching. So in this case, this is an example from Power Up 2. And all I did was use little clips. I used the snipping tool on my computer for a digital picture, but you can also take pictures literally of a course book picture and then upload and take snips. And if you show your students something like this, you can ask them to guess, what topic do you think we will be doing for this session? What will we learn? So I'm not going to open the chat box again because it seems to slow down. I'm worried about losing the screen. So assume that I've asked you to share your ideas about what the topic is for this particular lesson in Power Up 2. And hopefully you will have said it's about describing environments, words about nature and the environment. And they will be learning new vocabulary, and they'll also be reading and listening to a story. You can do the same thing with adults. Adults quite like trying to predict. It's a useful skill. If you don't want to use clips, you can, if you prefer, use a full picture, and this is taken off of some material for Power Up online, and you can probably guess from that that the topic is animals, and that they will be doing some listening and some speaking practice in the session. So don't forget, you can use your own camera to take pictures. You can, if you're face to face, you could show the pictures on the screen in the classroom if you have that kind of technology. If you don't, you can literally hold up a picture or hold up a book, the first page, from a distance, and ask your students to guess. Okay. As learners get used to these ideas, this is where we take the first step into autonomy. So with slightly older learners, you could ask them to prepare and share clues for the next lesson. So the students can volunteer. Once you have your volunteer, you might separately, in a separate chat, tell them the topic of the next lesson and hand over to them and ask them to prepare the clues for the lesson. And they can either send them to you by email, or if you share screen, you could get them to share their screens and hand over. If you are asking children to do this, if it's adults, it's not a problem, but with children, do be aware of safety. So you might want to guide them to a child-friendly search engine. There's an example there, kiddle.co, which is specially designed for children. If you are face-to-face, you can, instead of doing this online, you could ask the child to bring in their clues and share with the class. And adults actually quite like being given that kind of responsibility too. So you can ask them to prep in advance and be prepared to give maybe verbal clues to their class members. Another thing that you could do if you are online is to try an online jigsaw puzzle. So the activity is the same. However, this is what it looks like. So you can send this or share this with students. This is not live, but you can actually put your cursor onto the jigsaw pieces and move them around the board and gradually build up a jigsaw puzzle. Now you could send this to individual students to do their own, or you could share screen and share controls and let your students gradually move the pieces around together. You can also make this easy or difficult. This has 35 pieces, but you can do it with far fewer pieces or far more pieces, depending on how easy or difficult you want the activity to be. And it is super easy to use. The website is on the slide there. All you do is go to the website, upload a picture, and then press click, and it creates the jigsaw for you. So it's very, very easy to use, and you can share with your students and learners. You could, if you wish, because you're simply uploading a picture, you could actually write a word and take a photo and upload the photo. So there are all sorts of things that you could do with this. If you've got adults, you could have sentences, take a photo, and ask adults to actually reformulate questions or sentence forms to work on their accuracy. In this case, that is the picture that I created the jigsaw from. So this is a really nice activity. If you are face to face, you can still use the same idea. I've often done it in class. I take a picture laminate it and then cut it into jigsaw shapes. You might think, oh, that's an awful lot of work. But if you laminate and you keep the jigsaw pieces in little plastic bags, you can then reuse them. So if you choose pictures that are topics you use a lot in class, you'll have an opportunity to reuse them many times. Okay, so we also talked earlier, and I've been talking all the way through about offering choice. I think making your learners a key part of what happens in the classroom is so important for engaging them and for motivating them. So one thing that you can do is, for example, you can, when you list your outcomes, make the last outcome a choice. So maybe not grammar, they tend not to choose that. So you might say, we're going to be looking at talking about the past, we're going to be learning some new words. And then your last outcome, you could say, and then we can sing a song, or we can act out the story. What would you like to do? And your learners choose. Now, in class, they can put their hands up. They can tell you. Online, they could vote. Some online platforms have voting buttons, or they could just use their chat box or emoticons. So I think offering choice is really important. Don't forget too to continue to offer options during activities. So if you've offered, if you're doing an activity, don't forget to ask them about it. So you might be doing a song or a chant. Offer them the option: do you want to sing it or chant it? Do you want to do it in groups or individually? You might want to ask when they're doing an activity, do you want to write in the chat box or do you want to mime on the screen? So wherever possible, offer options during activities, not just at the beginning of the class. Also, don't forget you can scaffold activities. You've got slightly older learners, and if you have online facility, you can use breakout rooms. This means, if you're not familiar with it, dividing the rooms and putting them into different rooms during the lesson, and they talk to each other. If you are going to do something like that, don't forget to begin with a practice run. So the first time you do it, say, we're going to practice. I'm going to put you into the breakout rooms. I need you to have a chat, and then I will bring you back to me. So model, first of all. And again, give them responsibility, give them roles. So you might choose one student to be a room manager, another to report back on what happened in the room. And obviously you'd need to be checking in as you do that. The same thing works actually if you are dividing students for group work face-to-face, giving them specific roles. Making sure that you change that around for different activities gives them a sense of responsibility and develops their sense of autonomy. It's also important, I think, to choose activities that engage and offer decision making. So I hope that the activities I've shown you so far have all done that. For example, one of the things that we do this space that's included in Power Up is to have a picnic. The learners have been learning words about food and learning ways of offering. And so at the end of that particular unit of learning, they have a pretend picnic in the classroom. So the teacher will put down picnic, for example, a paper plate, label it food that they are there at the picnic, and then they offer each other. You can still do that online. So have a virtual picnic, set it up beforehand, and then during the actual lesson, if your students have cameras, get them to live stream so they can live stream using their phone or their device and actually show some food that they maybe have prepared for real to share in the picnic. And then you can actually have the picnic together, a virtual picnic. I think we're all getting used to doing things like that when we're talking to family, for those of us who still can't go out very much. Okay, so don't forget to use cameras. Here again, we've got another typical activity. In this case, it's a story that learners read and listen to. If you work with adults, you may well have written texts that they are using. Again, give choice. You could role play the story after you've done the activities. At the end, you could ask the children if they want to role play the story. Maybe they could make puppets. So one person could make a puppet of the horse, one person can be the cat. I actually have a real Cameron. I don't know if you can see him behind me. Cameron is the cat who is the main character here. And they can then role play the story, and let them choose their roles where possible. If you've got adults, it depends on what the text is about. Sometimes you can then do a follow-up role play. For example, if it's a text about problems with travel, you could ask your students to then role play making a complaint, something like that. And they can do that on camera if they've got audio. Okay, one of the other points that we said was very important for autonomy was positive self-reflection. For adults, this is not so difficult. Adults tend to be more reflective. For children, it's more of a challenge. So you need to start very slowly. This is what I was saying before about build it bit by bit. They're not going to do it well to begin with. They need time to develop the skill. You can use characters or puppets to model good self-reflection. As you see, I've got Cameron here, so you can use your little puppets and model for them what you're expecting. So you might have Cameron saying, yes, it was good, or I want to do it again, that kind of thing. And you also need to make sure you teach them phrases to do this. If they don't have the language to do it, then you need to support them with that. And it can be simple things like, I'm okay, I'm not sure, let's try again. Many of you will be familiar with techniques that you can use in class for this. So sometimes people have red and green cards, and they encourage the students to hold up a green card or a red card. You can also do thumbs up, I'm happy, I'm not sure, I'm not confident. Encourage them to do that. They could do that on camera, or they could type in a smiley face or a frowny face or a not sure, a question mark if you don't have a symbol. Or they can use the same red and green and the thumbs face to face. You can even do things like jump if you're happy, sit down if you're not sure. So build that up slowly. Don't forget to reflect during as well as at the end of lessons. So you can ask them at the end of little sections, how are you feeling? And also make it a bit concrete. So if you've done some words and they're all saying yes, say, okay, can you say some words? How many words can you say? So just push it a little bit further. With adults, obviously, you can give them a more detailed self-reflection and then actually test them quite hard. So ask them some concept check questions. You can use TPR, as I've said, up, thumbs down, that kind of thing. And you can use online and voting tools. If you have mini whiteboards, I use mini whiteboards in class a lot, and I get students to draw answers or write yes or no and hold them up in class face to face. But you could also do it online on camera. And if you don't have mini whiteboards, they can make their own if they use a plastic pocket, clear plastic pocket of a card. You can write on that and rub it clean. So that works if they're at home. Why not try crafts as well? So you can practice language by teaching them to make something, for example, using straws and cards, scissors and glue, and they can make red and green flags. So you're practicing the language during the making of the craft, and then once they've got their red and green flags, you can ask them to use them. Wave your flag, wave your green flag if you're happy, that kind of thing. And also we've talked about using chat boxes. But just to mention, if you have got very shy students, don't forget you have got a direct message option usually where you can write to them directly, just to them, and they can write back to you. And finally, a couple more things. You could ask your students, for example, at the end of a unit, you could ask them to send you a digital postcard. This is one I made on Canva. They also have an I'm sad one, but you can design them yourselves. So it's great for developing digital skills. Also good for adults. This is a kind of childish looking one, but some of the designs are quite adult and there's room for them to make lots of points. So you can ask adult students to give you more detailed feedback. And if you don't like the idea of digital postcards, you could also ask students to send you an online video message. The screenshot you can see there is an online message from Video Ask. It's really easy. You sign up, literally film yourself saying, I'd like to ask you about this, or how well you did. And you can add in options. You can see on the right, they can choose an option, or they can click respond and send you back a little spoken film. And that's a brilliant way to get students engaged. It works really well with both adults and with younger learners. There are lots of sites. There's also Flipgrid. That's very good for just sending instant mini films to each other. So I'm aware that we're coming with slightly over time because of our technical hitch. I hope it's made you feel better if you ever have technical hitches. We just have to ride it through. So we've looked at the idea of autonomy. It's about reflecting and it's about choice. We know that it's helpful for learners' life skills. We've looked at the fact that it can be challenging, particularly with younger learners. And hopefully some of the tips and ideas I have given you are ones that you will find useful, whether you're working online or whether you're working face-to-face or both. Here are some references. These are the references that I used during the webinar. And so I'd just like to say thank you very much. This is me. If you want to get in touch, that's my email address at Anglia Ruskin, where I work some of the time. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. So do get in touch if you'd like to. Be delighted to speak to colleagues around the world. And finally, I'd just like to ask if you have any questions. So any questions from anybody? I can't hear anything at the moment.
Hi Steph, it's Eve here.
Hi.
Hello, just collated a few of the questions. So we've got one here. What is the difference between autonomy and agency?
Oh gosh, that is quite a technical question. I suppose, I mean, I'm sure that there are really technical answers to that, which off the top of my head, I probably am not thinking